All right, to give just respect to you all and your time, it's about 12:01, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of our preliminaries and introductions, and hopefully we'll have a few more of our registered guests join us. My name's Katy Leffel, and I'm the director for the Oklahoma School Foundations Network. We are a program of the Oklahoma Foundation for Excellence, and our mission is to help support school foundations across the state of Oklahoma to provide training, to provide resources, to help you all succeed. And today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about strategic planning. Strategic planning is one of the services that I provide through the School Foundation Network, free for all Oklahoma school foundations. So there's never a charge for our services. And I just wanted to take a second to talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do to help your foundation. First of all, I'm available on my cell phone for on-call support. If you have a question, if you're struggling with an issue in your foundation and you could just use some advice, please give me a call. I don't always know the answer, but I'm always willing to find it. And if you're asking that question, a lot of times other foundations will have it too. And so I just would encourage you to reach out if there's some way that I could support your foundation. I have lots and lots of great sample documents, from bylaws to committee charters to fundraising appeal letters, just any and everything you can think of. And if there's a time when that service would be helpful to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to send you examples that could be helpful to your foundation. I provide custom board retreats. If you would like for me to come and talk to your board about a particular issue, if you're just wanting support, I had a recent opportunity to go speak to a board about Robert's Rules of Order and just do a refresher with them on that. So, whatever it is that you might be hoping to sort of brush up on as a board, that's something that I can work with you to custom tailor presentation for your board. We're here today to hear about the free strategic planning facilitation services that I can provide, and we're going to do an in-depth dive into that today. And these webinars are an ongoing theme. We started these back in the fall with our Fall Forum Fridays, which was a way that we adapted during COVID to bring our content online in webinar format, and those were really popular. And so we're continuing those throughout the year, hoping to do at least one quarterly to provide sort of that ongoing access to training for all of our school foundations. And then finally, we provide a half-price membership through our organization to the National School Foundation Association. And they have a whole nother level of robust services, webinars, conferences, and different discounts for vendors, from everything from insurance for your school foundation to CRM databases. And so if you are interested at all in becoming a member of the National School Foundation Association, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can tell you how we subsidize that and can get that for you for half price. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in today. I'm really excited to have two guests here with me today who have been through the strategic planning process with the School Foundations Network. And I have Amy Ishmael, who's the president of the Miami Public Schools Enrichment Foundation, and Deanna Boston, who is the executive director of the Edmond Public Schools Foundation, with me today. And we're going to start off by having them each kind of tell a little bit about their foundation, how they came around to deciding that it was time for them to do a strategic planning. And then we're going to go into sort of an overview of what that process looked like for both of those organizations. I did the strategic planning retreat with Miami back in September of 2019, so pre-COVID, but we still use some technology to help sort of leverage the time available and make it a really smooth process for them. And then we took that to the next level in my work with Edmond, where we did an all virtual strategic planning retreat this past January because we were in the middle of COVID, and learned some really interesting lessons in that on sort of how, again, to further leverage technology to make that a smooth process. So I'm going to start with Miami. The Miami Public Schools Enrichment Foundation was formed in 1988, so they have a long, successful history of helping the students in Miami and partnering with their district. They have most of their donations flowing through an endowment that they've been working really hard for a long time to grow. Their district serves, and this is according to the latest available data on the school report card site. So this might not be the most up-to-date numbers, but about 2,200 students in 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. So I'm going to start just by introducing Amy. And Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
And I want to start by just asking you, at the time that Miami, you're the current president of the foundation, but at the time that we went through the strategic planning, you were serving as a board member.
Correct. Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what got your board interested in pursuing doing a strategic planning?
Sure. We, as you mentioned, we are a 15-member board who all have other full-time jobs and other commitments. And we have a strong board. We've remained stable, like you said, since 1988. But a couple of years ago, Georgianne Roy was our president at that time. And we kind of felt like we were spinning our wheels. You know, we had a strong foundation. We had events that we were doing on a regular basis, but we just didn't feel like we were being as effective as we could be. And so Georgianne proposed that we go through this strategic planning process to help us gain a new perspective, get some creativity flowing, use the process to get some ideas to help us be more effective. We wanted to improve our impact, and we thought that through strategic planning, it would be a great way to help us do that.
Awesome, thanks. And Deanna, I'm going to talk just briefly about Edmond. Obviously, most people on the call probably know Edmond's a pretty big district. You serve almost or a little over 25,000 students with 17 elementary schools, 6 middle schools, and 3 high schools. And the foundation in Edmond was started, it says, in the early 80s as an endowment, Edmond Endowment Foundation, and then was transitioned to the Edmond Public Schools Foundation in about 1999. And you serve as a full-time director for them. And I know that you all have one other part-time staff member. So they're lucky to have you sort of in that leadership role and helping to coordinate the efforts of the board. But would you talk a little bit about what led you to pursue strategic planning with your board?
Yeah, so I've been here almost 2 years, so not very long. And I've worked in the nonprofit profession for over 20 years. I've lost count. Just saying over 20 years it'll be accurate. So when I came here, what I found is we had a very engaged board, very enthusiastic board, and we had lots of ideas. So strategic planning was a way for us to really take a deep dive into all of these ideas that everyone had. How could we implement them? Which ones rose to the top? And then what would we need to be able to accomplish that? So that's really the big reason we knew we needed an updated strategic plan, is to kind of capture all of that and get us focused.
I love that. And that's such a great reason for any foundation to undergo strategic planning, because oftentimes what we find with boards is that everybody does have lots of great ideas, but until we all sit down and agree together on really what's the most important thing to pursue first. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can solidify through this strategic planning process that I think is so essential. So I'm going to take just a minute and walk through a little bit about why you should do a strategic planning, what strategic planning can bring to the table for your foundation. So strategic planning done right allows the following. First of all, for all stakeholders and board members to be heard and respected. We all know when you serve on a board, you have lots of different personalities. Some people are very outspoken. Some people are very quiet. Some people don't hesitate to make their opinions known, and some are a little more reticent to speak up. But those that are more reticent don't necessarily lack in ideas and lack in great ideas. And so one of the powerful things about strategic planning is it gives everyone a chance to voice those opinions and those creative ideas. Second of all, it gives you time to really carefully consider your current status of your organization. We're going to start out talking about how we do an overall assessment, where we will ask your board members to sort of rate, where are you right now? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the things that you should be focused on as a group? Number 3, that collaboration among all the board members in setting the course forward. Just getting everyone in the same room sometimes, we think that sounds so simple, and how is that going to magically change what we're doing? But there is some alchemy and some magic that happens when you do strategic planning and you get everyone together in that retreat setting, really focused on the organization. Having that shared responsibility for the future, that agreed upon roadmap for how to accomplish those goals, is just really invaluable. And then finally, the commitment. It takes a big commitment to put together a strategic planning and to make the time for it. And once you've gone through that process as a board and everyone's on the same page, I think it really ups the ante and the level of commitment that the board has to seeing things through. Amy, I see you nodding your head. Is that something that you've seen in Miami?
Yes, definitely. I think, when we had a focus and we kind of have a plan in place, I think it's helped us just move forward with that. So I agree with you completely there.
Yeah, that's great. So with both of your organizations, we kind of started by tuning into that whole idea of what is your why, right? That every good nonprofit organization has got to have that finely tuned mission statement, that mission, that vision, that sort of guiding principle of what it is that's going to move things forward. And one of the things that came across in our Miami survey was the fact that you all sort of felt like your mission statement was a little unwieldy and needed to be workshopped.
Yes. Yes.
And one good rule of thumb for that, and this is something we did that was kind of tricky with the Miami board, is we asked them to write out their mission statement with no cheating.
Yeah, couldn't look.
Yeah, couldn't look. And, it was amazing. We got back lots of different versions that had some overlapping points, but it was clear that it wasn't something that was super easy to remember.
Right. Yes.
And so one of the things that we were able to do is sort of go through a process to refine that for the Miami board. And then Edmond had already started that process. Deanna, your board had taken some time to come up with some rough drafts of mission and vision statements, but you just needed a little bit more time to sort of fine tune the wording.
Yeah, and I'll interject this here, but one of the big values I found in Katy helping us is being able to move us along. So there was a lot. It was probably about a year-long discussion on our mission and vision, and we were able to come to a consensus within the first hour of our retreat, and it was decided. So there's just a huge value in having someone external come in and facilitate that for you.
Thanks, Deanna. Yeah. It was fun to go through that process and to see it in action with both of your boards. And so you all emerged from your strategic planning with new, fresh mission statements. And I've got those up there if people are interested in taking a look. You can see, I think both of them came down quite a bit in their wordiness. And that was one thing we were really trying to do in both cases, was to simplify and make it something that board members could remember. And then that statement I put at the bottom there, your mission becomes a valuable filter for the work and priorities of your foundation. And that's why I think it's worthwhile to take time to make sure that your mission statement is in good shape and is sort of agreed upon and understood by all your board members before you go into a strategic planning. And so just putting it out there that that's something that we could include if you're interested in pursuing strategic planning and you feel like that's an area that your board could use some work. So when we start talking about the process itself, one of my favorite things to do is to get to work with boards to figure out what is the right process to get the results that you're looking for. That whole begin with the end in mind, right? And so in doing so, we want to ask the questions, what's going to work best for your board? In person, a virtual event, maybe some sort of a hybrid event. How much time is realistic for your board to spend on a retreat day? And that's going to be different depending on the people on your board and how much time you think they would be willing to commit to. What are the stakeholders that you want to involve in the process? And I'll say in both of your cases, both for Miami and Edmond, you all did reach out a little bit wider with some of your survey, I think, to some administrators and some people outside your board, but then really decided that retreat day needed to just mostly be about your board. So that was something you guys kind of had in common.
Yeah.
And I think that's a smart way to approach it. It's valuable to seek that outside input and to kind of hear what other people think about you. But in both cases, I think that you all made the right decision in really kind of making this focused on being board work for the actual day of the retreat. And then that final question, what outcome is going to lead to calling this retreat day a success? That's sort of the key question that I always start with. What is going to make you at the end of the day say, that was fantastic and I feel really good about the outcome? And then we can look at those sort of things and put together a process that's going to work, hopefully, to get us through your retreat day to that goal on the other end. But it's always going to start with an honest assessment. And so I've got this tried and true SWOT graphic up here for you. If you've ever been involved with strategic planning, you've probably done a SWOT analysis. And it's one of those things that's a little bit trite and has been a little bit overdone, but there's a reason for it. It's because it's a really great way to sort of assess your foundation or your organization, gives you some metrics to look at. What are the strengths, the weaknesses of your organization? What are the external things that could affect you? Opportunities you should take advantage of, or threats that you should watch out for. So in both your cases in Miami and in Edmond, we chose to use technology to facilitate doing that SWOT analysis before the retreat ever happened. And that's something I've become a big fan of. We've used Google Survey in both your cases to do that SWOT survey and to ask each board member to respond on their own. And I think there are a couple powerful things that brings to the table. First of all, people can take their time in responding. They're not in a pressure-filled environment. They don't have other people surrounding them. They get to voice their own ideas without hearing from others. It was an individual process that asked you to say what you thought in the absence of other people also saying what they think. And there's some power there because, again, we have those different thinkers that are in our communities. And sometimes if you're thinking one thing and 5 other people say something completely different, what's our tendency? Like, oh, I guess I'm odd man out, right? Like, I'm really far off. I just need to sit back and be quiet because I have something crazy to say. And so this really allows board members to speak up and to say what's on their mind and to move forward, sort of really hearing what other people think. Mm-hmm. And then again, just to be able to carefully consider their responses. So I'm going to click over here real quickly and show you a sample survey. And this is the one we used, Amy, with Miami's foundation, to just sort of assess, what are board members thinking? So starting off, we did do it anonymously. We wanted people to feel free to really speak their mind. So I did collect email addresses, but that was just so I could track who had put theirs in and who I still needed to sort of track down. I told you I gave them a trick question to start with. What is your mission statement? And made them sort of write it out cold. And then how do you feel like you're doing on this mission? What are some things you think should be added to or subtracted from your current mission statement? And then just some general statements. What are your strengths? What are your foundation weaknesses or areas that you could use improvement? What are some new opportunities you'd like to see the foundation pursue? What are the threats to the continued health and success of your foundation? And then from your foundation's committee, because again, a lot of times we have people serving in very particular areas of the foundation, and they develop a good expertise in those areas. So asking them to say, hey, from your position of expertise on the board in your area, what are some things that you think the board really needs to be paying attention to? What are some of the important issues that need to be discussed? And then we did some dream questions because, it's fun to think, if we do the work now, where could we take this foundation into the future? And so we asked the board to really think, if you could time travel 5 years into the future, what would you like to see? And if you could make that 10, 15, or even 25 years down the line, what would you like to see? And then finally, just a general open-ended question, which I always like to include, basically, what didn't I ask you that I need to know going into this meeting? So that's an example, just a sample of a Google survey that we were able to use. And then I was able to take those responses and sort of collate and look for patterns and then analyze what I got back and send it to the board so that they had the opportunity also to see everyone's responses. And there's a lot of power there because what you're doing is working through the whole process of getting everybody on the same page before you ever step into a room together. Mm-hmm. So Amy, do you feel like that was helpful to go through that process before starting the retreat?
Yes, I really do. I think like what you said, we were able to respond candidly, and we didn't hold anything back because we didn't, if we were against what other people were saying, that kind of thing. It also gave, a variety of different perspectives. So when we were in the room, I never thought of that, so I think it was very helpful for us to have that done before we did the process.
Deanna, was it similar feelings from your group?
Yes. I mean, for definitely having that time for those who want to take a little more time to think through their answers. And then those who do already have a pretty good idea of what they want to say, able to do that. I found that really helpful ahead of time instead of in person. And then, like you said, giving them all their responses to see, and they go, wow, I did not think of that, to help them think that through even more before we got together.
Yeah, I'm going to share really quickly, Deanna, the follow-up report I did with Edmond, where I just kind of took all the answers and just sort of created a report, so everyone's answers under each question so that you could really read, what did everyone have to say about this? How does everyone think? And I think it's really powerful in seeing how many times the same things are repeated. A lot of times what we find out is that most board members actually do know what needs to be done.
Mhm.
There's just not been a process to sort of solidify that and make sure that everyone has the will to step forward and do it together. And so there's power in sort of seeing not just the outlier ideas, but also the ideas where there are tons of similarities.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of fun to go through that process and to watch how similar, from my standpoint, because I'm not a part of your foundation, but it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly what some of the big issues are.
Mhm.
And then what we did with both your foundations is after everybody had had a chance to read over the result, then we came back one more time and we said, hey, now, given the results of the survey, after you've read everyone's opinion, what do you think are the top 3 things that this foundation really, really needs to make a goal going forward? And this also was very fascinating because, again, when we got these results back, in both cases, things really started to fall into areas where people were in agreement. And so what that allowed us to do is to sort of cut through some of the first level conversations that sometimes need to happen when you start strategic planning, and allowed us to sort of jump things off with having a shared idea of how to go forward. And what that helps us do is to use that retreat time wisely, right? We're all very busy people. Committing to spending time outside of your job and outside of your family, sitting in a room, talking about the foundation, whether that's for 3 hours, 4 hours, or even more, that's a huge commitment. And that's a big ask of your board. And so I love that using these sort of technology-driven techniques can help make sure that that time is really spent on valuable, constructive discussion.
Mhm.
The other thing it let us do is to set up breakout groups and assign leaders to those groups ahead of time.
Mhm.
Because we were able to look and see, oh my gosh, everybody was on board. And for example, like in Miami, I know one thing that everyone seemed to be on board on was increasing the capacity of the foundation through seeing how you might add a staff member.
Mhm.
And so then we were able to create a committee where the people who had the know-how to answer questions about the financial end of that were in a group together
Mhm.
to be the ones sort of brainstorming on that topic. And then one of your goals was to, come up with a communication plan. So then the people that were in a position to really have that knowledge were put in a group together ahead of time.
Right.
So everybody jumps off on, sort of on the same page. We have those groups ready to go. And we're also allowed to sort of bring in any important documents that we're going to wish we had there.
Mhm.
And that's important too, because then you don't waste time thinking, oh yeah, do you have the financials from last year? What exactly was the number for that event or this event, or what did we bring in?
Yeah.
So Amy, can you talk for just a minute about how that worked out for you all to sort of be ready to jump into those groups? Did you all find that helpful?
Yes, I think we did. And we have committees, and I think it was useful to have people who were on committees kind of combine those and put them in those working areas when you looked at our goals and what we wanted to accomplish. So we did have, what we've done in the past, and we could work forward from that. So I think it was very helpful to have those groups set up and established before we went. It allowed us to kind of just jump right in with the issues and work forward. So.
And then Deanna, I know you and I were a little bit sneaky, and you did a great job of making sure that you had board members in sort of group leadership positions that you knew could manage the personalities in that group and sort of keep people on task. So would you talk a little bit about how that's helpful?
Yeah, it was kind of about two. There's just different styles of working through things. Some like to take just more time and are more thoughtful about it. Some have their mind made up pretty quickly. So making sure that we were strategic in who was in what group and what leader could help that person move their idea along maybe a little bit quicker, because it was a whole afternoon, but we still ran out of time. So it was really important to have that set up strategically beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. So then when we got to the point where we'd gone through the mission statement, we had all this background stuff ready to go, and we were ready to get out into our breakout groups, Obviously in person, with Miami, we were able to do that with the good old fashioned giant Post-it paper. And we went to different corners of the room and people were face to face and able to talk through and just start brainstorming. So if we want to grow capacity, what are the things we needed to get ourselves there? And just to take that sort of traditional in-person brainstorming time. For Edmond, we had to get a little bit more creative because we weren't all together. We were using Zoom. And so we found a really cool tool that I want to show you all that's actually a free thing available through Google Suite. And that is a program called Jamboards. And Jamboards are basically just a virtual whiteboard. So as you can see, we were able to set up, and this content that's sort of pasted in up here, this came from that give me your top 3 goals question that was asked. So these are all of the goals that people wrote that were related to community engagement, communication, and PR. We were able to capture those and put them up. And then as they were broken out into their different Zoom rooms, they could come in and make a new Post-it. You make a sticky note just by clicking on this. You can add your content to it, and then it gets pasted up here. And so everyone who was in that group was able to jump on the Jamboard at the same time and have sort of that same effect of everybody brainstorming and writing down their ideas together and seeing that and having it be a really visual thing. The other thing that was really cool is, you know, in Miami, when we were done with the day, I went around and took pictures of all of the big sticky notes and brought them back to my office. You know, this is also really cool because it's just all captured and saved here for you. So that you have all this information. So after that sort of massive brainstorming session, you go back to your traditional narrowing it down, right? Now we have all this great content. And in both cases, we took some time to go through and let each group present their ideas and let the others ask for clarification. You know, sometimes someone writes something down on a sticky note and you think, what did they mean by that? Right? So we had to take the time to really go through and listen to each group's ideas, listen to what they had to say. Then in Miami, we did that traditional dot voting. You get your 5 dots, you put your 5 dots next to the 5 things that you think are the very most critical. And then we're going to pick maybe 3 or 4 of those to become goals to move forward. Mm-hmm. We had to do things a little bit differently again in Edmond because we were using technology. And so we went back to Google Survey. And so as the groups were presenting, I was taking their Post-it note ideas and putting them into a Google survey. And then when everyone had presented, we went through and told them that you basically get to choose 5 from this whole page. Now, if you're really passionate about capacity building, you might put all 5 of your dots on things from that area, and that's fine. But that allowed us then to really quickly, just like you can visually look at the dots when you're doing it in person, it allowed us to really quickly be able to go and look and see, oh, you know, developing long-term donor strategies. That was the #1 under fundraising strategies, which got the most votes overall. And so Deanna and I were then able to quickly, while the group was on a break, sort of figure out what are the things that are going to make that top 3 or 4 list for us going forward. And then once you've got those top goals, you've got to start breaking it down, right? Because it's great to say, oh yeah, we all agree we're gonna, you know, increase capacity and we have these 9 strategies that were on the board for that. Well, you know, what's first? How do we do this in a way that makes sense? And so in Miami, then we were able to look at those top vote getters and then let people self-select, hey, which one of these do you feel really passionately about? And so at that point, it wasn't us assigning the groups anymore. It was really asking them, hey, what do you want to be a champion for? Which one of these goal areas gets you fired up and do you want to be involved in? And so then we let them sort of rearrange themselves and take that work product and then really start to break down into smaller bite-sized action steps into SMART goals. And so when we say SMART goals, again, this is another thing that is just, you know, not new and exciting, but it's done over and over again because it works. Meaning, make sure that whatever you set out is something specific, that it's something that you can measure, you know, not just we need to make more money. Well, how much more money? You know, make sure that it's both ambitious, but also achievable. We all know, you know, if you set out to lose 100 pounds, that's that's really ambitious, but is it achievable? Is that something that people are going to feel super comfortable jumping in and getting going on? That leads to overwhelm, right? When we choose a goal that's way too big. And so how do we set a goal that's both ambitious, but also feels like it's reachable to keep us motivated? How do we make sure that it's a relevant goal, that it's really related to our work, it's really getting us at what we wanted to achieve? And then putting some timing on it, because we all know volunteer boards are filled with busy people. And it is so easy to let one meeting roll to the next meeting, roll to the next meeting. And before you know it, months have gone by and you may or may not have actually achieved the things that you wanted to. So with Amy and Miami, we were able to get a lot of this work done at the very end of the retreat. And I wouldn't say it was all in a completely finished, polished, smart form, but they were able to get pretty far in setting down some tactical steps that they wanted to use going forward, which was really great. Mm-hmm. Amy, did that leave you guys feeling energized to walk out the door knowing that you already had some of that work done?
Yes, it did, definitely. It's exciting to kind of have a plan in place and to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to do next, and have people follow through with it. So I think it was very good for us to be in that spot.
Yeah. With Deanna, we sort of ran out of time on this. So by the time we had kind of circled back around and gotten the strategies voted on, we did have a little bit of time left, but Zoom fatigue is real, right? And so as opposed to being in the same room where, we were in Miami where everybody could just take, one extra 5-minute break and we popped them full of just another little piece of chocolate to push them through. The Edmond crew, we could just kind of see was running out of time and probably wouldn't have the capacity left to sort of talk about this. But luckily they have Deanna to help shepherd them through the process. And so what they did is they did these meetings as a follow-up. Board members chose an area that they wanted to champion. And then they got together afterwards to really try to break down what exactly is the goal, who's responsible, what's that target date for completion. And this is just sort of some rough draft work that they did, in trying to flesh this out a little bit. So this is an ongoing process for them. As I said, we just did this in January. So Deanna, can you talk a little bit about how that's worked to do this as follow-up work?
Yes. So they have been very engaged. I have 3 different groups because we have 3 different objectives. So the 3 that came out of that were capacity, both staff and volunteer capacity. The other one was collaborating, building a strong collaborative relationship with the district. We have a new superintendent who will start July 1. So that's a really important one. Also with me being still fairly new, it's a really important goal. And then the last one was long-term sustainability and donors. So we have 3 separate groups working on that. One of the groups has pretty much, worked through all of their goals. Another group is spending a lot of time on it and very thoughtful about it. And then the third group wants to wait until the superintendent, the new superintendent has some buy-in for those goals for the collaboration. So we're at 3 different phases for all 3 of our objectives. But it does give us some time to think through what we're planning and making sure that we're deliberate about what our goals are going to be. But at the same time, we've made sure to say, this isn't a strategic plan necessarily that goes on the shelf for 3 years later. Let's get these goals set, and then we can always revisit and update as things happen.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And that's actually what we're going to talk about next. So after you've done all that work, there are sort of 2 things left, right? First of all, you really need to vote to adopt the plan. And this seems like almost a no-brainer, like a step that maybe doesn't need to be taken, because everyone was at the retreat and we all were part of the plan. But I found that this is really a critical step. When the goals are set and the plan is put together, there is power in cementing that into place by saying, we would like to vote to adopt this plan, and having everyone cast their vote. And I'll just give you sort of a personal example with that. A board that I'm super involved with did a strategic planning. We had been wanting to do a rebranding of our organization. We had a board member who that is his area of expertise, and he was ready to go with it. But he did not feel comfortable moving forward until he really had the okay of the board. And so going through the process, putting that in as a strategic plan goal, and then voting on it, he hit the ground running right after that. And we were able to make major progress really quickly. But I think that a lot of people feel that way, right? As a board member, we want to do what's helpful to our board, but we certainly don't want to be the person that's out there like a rogue, just saying, oh, well, I have a branding business, so I'll just do a whole new, brand for the organization. He really needed that reassurance that this was something that everyone was behind. And so I think that there is a power in sort of making sure that everybody solidifies and says, this is our plan. We're all in this together. These are the things we're going to prioritize. Either of you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it is helpful because I think that way it's solidified and you have buy-in from everyone that's involved to say, yes, we committed to doing this. It's not just, oh yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give a specific example. Like I said, there were so many ideas and directions we could go when I first started. And now that we haven't adopted it yet, we haven't voted yet, but it's still, I know that there's a direction we're going, and that includes our endowment funds. And so now I can start having those conversations and planting those seeds when I'm talking to people about, this is an opportunity for you, because I know that's the direction the board has chosen to go towards.
Yeah, I love that. And then Deanna, you said something that I think is so important, which is keeping that plan alive, right? That we don't want to go through all this work and then set this up on a shelf and no one ever talks about it again. And I think that is sort of a stereotype about strategic planning that is in some ways earned in certain organizations, right? That we go through all this and do we ever make progress? And so I would just stress that is something that really is going to take that commitment from your board, right? You've got to start making that a part of every meeting. For the organization that I was telling you about, that I was involved with, the strategic plan, I try now as board chair to include an update on one strategic planning area, at least at every meeting, and report out about that. And what that does is it celebrates the successes as we're having them. It keeps the focus on the fact that we are accomplishing things in the strategic plan and we are moving things along. And it puts pressure on groups that maybe haven't made as much progress in their goal area. It's a little bit of that sort of quality peer pressure that gets them to say, hey, the group that's working on this goal is really making lots of progress. When are you guys going to meet again? Because we all, at the end of the day, need that accountability a little bit to keep us moving forward. One other thing I'll say about that, I'm getting ready to hopefully do a strategic retreat with the Jinx Public Schools Foundation, and their director, Elizabeth Embody, does an annual planning retreat with her board. And they do not do a whole new strategic plan, obviously, every year when they get together. But what we're in the process of doing is their last plan was made also in 2019. And so she wants to have her board sort of evaluate that plan. How much progress have we made? What are the things that we can check off of this plan and say, hey, we accomplished that? What are the things that we really need to invest some more time and effort in? And then are there any things that need to just be retired because maybe they're not an urgent goal anymore? The landscape has changed a lot for us all in the last 2 years, especially in the midst of COVID. And it's incredibly reasonable to think that we need to change our plans based on that. And so I love that idea too of, maybe after it's been a couple of years, you commit to doing a short planning day where you get together to sort of talk about the plan. Is the plan still relevant? Are there things that we can give ourselves a big pat on the back for and say, hey, we did it? Are there things that we, really need to add or change in order to keep our momentum moving forward? So I like that strategy and that idea of the fact that, maybe every 4 or 5 years you undergo a big strategic planning process, but that there are ways to keep it fresh and to make sure you're revisiting it in smaller steps along the way. Amy, have you guys had some success in trying to keep this at the forefront? What strategies have you all used?
Really been keeping it, trying to keep it on each agenda, just going through the things that we have included on our strategic plan with each board meeting. We meet on a monthly basis. So we've just trying to keep it on the forefront for us. It's kind of where we are, but I do like the idea of setting up just a quick, because it has been almost 2 years now, just setting up a day that we can all get together and see where we are, because we have made a lot of progress, but it would be nice to put it down on paper and be able to check things off, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Deanna, obviously you guys are still working to finalize your report. So, you know, this is maybe not necessarily where you are yet, but you will be. And so what plans do you have for trying to make sure that you're continuing to move things forward?
Well, I did take your idea, as you had mentioned that to me before, and it was on our board agenda this month. And so we just had an agenda item that says strategic plan update, and each leader of those 3 objectives reported out what they'd been working on, kind of like you said, to kind of hold each other accountable. Like one group was way further along than the other. So it's just there, it's always in front of them. And it's on the agenda now as a standing item.
I love that. So that basically kind of takes you through the process and how we did it, both with Miami in person, but using some technology to smooth things along, and then just as a completely virtual effort for Deanna's group with Edmond in January. Amy, you're a little bit further out, obviously, from the strategic planning. I would love it if you would be willing just to sort of share a little bit about some of the wins that you all have had, and just sort of how this strategic planning has overall made an impact in Miami and the things that you're doing.
Sure. As you mentioned, we're a smaller board, and I think that we kind of felt a little trapped by that. You know, what can we actually do? You mentioned that one of our first ideas was to hire an employee to be the director of the foundation. And I think that's probably our largest win. We were able to, during that event, partner with our public school system and develop a way that we could hire an individual who could be the director of the foundation for us. She is a part-time employee, so that's a little bit challenging, but it is so nice to have somebody that we can rely on to do the day-to-day functions for the foundation. So that has been amazing in itself. She, like I said, she's probably the biggest win, but it's all that in itself has helped us work towards many additional goals that we established during the strategic planning process. She's focused on developing membership and improving our communication. You talked about our communication plan and our desire to do that. She is sending out quarterly emails, newsletters to our members of the board. And then she's also doing campaigns to connect with our alumni and to grow our membership. We developed a tiered membership process so that we can have different levels of membership, which we didn't have before. So that's been very successful. That's something that came from the strategic plan. We changed our investment strategy. We also created a formalized budget, which was something we had never had before. So it's nice to be able to work off that. That has allowed us to change up some of our other operations and the programs that we do, because we know every year this is the amount of money you're going to have. And it's just helped us change the way that we do things and be more effective with what we're doing. We changed our teacher grant, the way that we do our teacher grants, to be through Donors Choose. And that had allowed us just in itself to double the funding that we gave for teacher grants in the last year. So that was just incredible for us to be able to do. All in all, the strategic planning process proved to be very successful for our board. It's allowed us to move forward on several initiatives. Again, we're a smaller foundation, but being able to prioritize and set those things in place and then to see the progress we've made, I think it's been outstanding for our board.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'm really excited for you to share that story, because I think a lot of times those of us that serve on boards of smaller organizations, we think, oh, I mean, that's great that, that Oklahoma City and Tulsa have a strategic plan, but, in our foundation, we're all volunteers. We're just doing the things that we need to do to keep moving things forward. And I love hearing that taking that step out to kind of set a bold vision really has made such an impact in the work that you're doing. And also taking a lot of things off of your board's shoulders by finding a way to get that part-time help from someone who is there to manage a lot of those tasks that sometimes can drown a board member.
They get put to the back burner because, things get prioritized and get in the way. So it has been tremendous to have her there, because we know those things are happening. Our membership drive has happened. We're able to plan additional events and know that she's there to help us. So I think it's been extremely valuable for us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And Deanna, what about you? What do you see as being some wins from this process? And what kind of feedback did you get from your board after going through the strategic planning?
Well, I'll start with the feedback. This is a plug for everyone to contact Katy and have her help you. Like, they had only amazing things to say about Katy, her jam boards, and all of the planning that went into it ahead of time. So that was a lot of what I heard about afterwards. But I'll say that I think they all feel like we have a direction, even though it's not finalized. And I'll give an example of something that how we've already been able to utilize that direction, the vision that the board sees. Our superintendent is retiring, and he was instrumental in getting support staff and rookie teacher of the year added to our celebration of excellence, which was teacher of the year traditionally until 2 years ago. So he was instrumental in his position in getting that, but he also his personal financial donations and getting those started. And so when he retires, they wanted to do kind of announcement gifts in lieu of, please give to the foundation. And I was able to say, hey, our board is strategically thinking about the celebration of excellence endowment, and he's already contributed to that. We need to get to this level to permanently endow that. If people will make gifts specifically for that in his honor, we can do that. That would not have happened. That thought process for me as a staff person would not have been solidified in that moment when I had that conversation if the board hadn't already done this work. So it's already paying off, even though we haven't even finalized everything. There's a direction for the organization, and now I can look for opportunities as they come up and direct people in that direction.
I love that. I'm not seeing any questions so far in our Q&A box. So attendees, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw one in the Q&A box. But also in the meantime, I'm gonna let you all know I will send the recording of this out to all the attendees along with the slide presentation, if that would be helpful for you to have. But certainly wanna highlight my contact information. My cell phone is listed on my card up here, and that would be the best way to reach me as we still continue to work mainly from home in the midst of sort of what we hope is the tail end of COVID. Oh, we have a question. Okay. Amy, let me know if you know the answer to this. Kathy would like to know, how much are you all able to pay for compensation for your part-time person?
I did not confirm this before our meeting. I apologize. The one thing I confirmed was that she was part-time and not full-time. And I apologize, I don't have that, but Kathy, I would be happy to get that for you and share that information with you.
One thing that I'll share, Amy, that I know just from sort of our conversations is that, you mentioned one of your success outcomes was moving all of your money from sort of CDs to investment funds, and that caused a huge uptick in the amount of money that you had available from your endowment, because most of your funding is done through your endowment. You have a really good sized endowment. But I think that you can correct me if I'm totally wrong, but that alone wound up being enough, I think, for you all to cover salary for your staff person, or pretty close.
I was not in the position I am now. I was not actually an officer on the board when we went through the strategic planning process, but for some reason, I think it was a partnership with our local school district that actually, I'm not sure where the funding came from. So I need to confirm that too, Katie, but yes, the change in how we invested our funds made a tremendous impact on our availability of funding. So
yeah. And Kathy's got another follow-up question here for us. It's another good one, which is, what's the best way to get all board members to participate either on-site or in the virtual strategic planning event? And she says, I always hear that the time for that is prohibitive, and people use that as an excuse for not wanting to make it happen. Deanna, do you want to speak to that a little bit with your board and kind of how you approach that?
Yeah. So first, like I said, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And if you get 75% participation, that's really incredible, especially on a virtual event when we have all been zoomed out. But I think we had, if not 100%, like 99%, like we had almost full participation. And I think there's two reasons why. One, we made it a priority at the beginning of the year. So we set a calendar for the year. And this was on the calendar when they got their calendar at the first meeting of the year. So we made sure they knew about it. It was important. And then the second thing I think was really helpful was the work that we were doing ahead of time. Not only did it save time for the actual retreat day, but it was a constant reminder of how important this is. And then I'll add one more to that, is having board leadership who kind of champions that. I know that they hear from me all the time. I'm usually asking them for one more thing. So if there's the board president or the governance chair, somebody who wants to champion that, we actually had a board member who wanted to champion strategic planning. So hearing that other voice and making them excited about it will get the board excited about it. So those are kind of the three things that I see that helped us get really strong participation.
I love that. And Amy, I know we planned yours quite a bit out ahead of time too. I think your board probably had at least 6 months notice.
Yes. We just expressed they expressed the need for us to have this plan in place, because like I said, a lot of us felt like we had good ideas, we had things that were happening, but we felt like we were spinning our wheels because we were doing the same thing. We weren't really improving or increasing what we were doing, that kind of thing. So I think when we all decided that strategic planning was the way that we needed to go, everybody was bought in. She made sure that it fit into all of our schedules, that we didn't devote, I think we did a full day session, but we just made sure that everybody could, be a part of that. And we had almost full board participation also.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I do think giving that good amount of notice and either just setting it so far out like Deanna did, where you can just kind of say, look, I mean, I'm giving this to you almost a year in advance, and I know you don't have anything planned on this day, so you need to protect it, right? That's one way that works. And then even with the 6 months out, I think we gave your board maybe 1 or 2 options to choose from, Amy, and so then selected the one that had the least conflict.
Yes.
So Kathy, maybe both of those strategies would be helpful in sort of thinking about. The other thing is that to do this right, you kind of do need some lead up time. And for me to work with you, it's good for us to have some lead up time, to have several conversations, to workshop that's those surveys, to make sure that we're asking the right questions for your board to get at what it is that, you think you guys need to pursue. And so, it's not a bad thing if you're thinking, oh man, I'd really like to do strategic planning, but I'm not sure this year is going to work. I mean, we can look out as far out as you want to, as far as, getting this set and on a calendar for your board. So I definitely don't think that there's anything wrong with setting it a long ways out and giving yourself some good lead up time to really make sure that you're prepared to make the most of it. But that's a great question, Kathy, because you're right. It is, everybody's time is valuable. And just to contrast, Amy's board, our retreat, I believe that day was 9 to 3. And we kind of had a working lunch. We had a few breaks in there. Deanna, we did yours in an afternoon virtually. And I think, wasn't it 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 5?
1 to 5 on a Friday.
Yeah, 1 to 5 on a Friday afternoon. And so, same thing, like obviously that was a much shorter amount of time, but that explains why we didn't get around to that second round of doing all of those SMART goals with her group, because we just didn't have enough time. And that's part of it too. If for your board, Kathy, it's not going to work to have 4 hours set to the side, what would it look like if your board did a 3-hour session? What could you accomplish? And then what could you commit to? Maybe the next board meeting, you commit to using that time, instead of doing a traditional board meeting, into doing those breakout groups and finalizing those SMART goals. I think there are a lot of creative ways that boards can, figure out how to make progress. And to take that long view, that it's okay if this isn't all put together like Deanna's doing. She started this process. We had the retreat in January. They're still working to get things to a place where they're ready to vote on the plan. But in the meantime, they're still having wins related to the plan. So, even if it takes a while to get to that final spot. Any other questions?
There's a couple that came through that I see on the chat, but first I want to go back and say that our foundation is what pays her salary. I was confirming this. I was text messaging while we've been talking, but it is paid by that. She is a retired teacher, and so we got her for a steal. It's around $12,000 that we pay her. Like I said, she is part-time, so that's how that was done. Our donors choose, the question that I saw was about donors choose and how we used that. The process that we used for grants previously was we had our teachers submit grant proposals to the board. And then we knew we had a certain amount of money and we divvied that up. You know, we selected grants and then applied that to those and then saw what we had left over. It was a very long, drawn out process. It took lots of time by our committee that was our grant committee. And so after our strategic planning process, they came up with the idea to use Donors Choose. And what we did was we had the teachers actually submit their grant proposals through Donors Choose. And then we devoted whatever amount of money we had set aside for the grants to help go into those. And there's a strategy. I'm not on that committee, so I don't know it exactly, but there's a strategy that they use to help those get funded. So what happens with Donors Choose is that those are open to people. I believe it's worldwide. It may be just in the United States, but it's worldwide. Katie shaking her head, yes. Yeah. Can go in and see opportunities to help fund those grants that are submitted by people all over the place. And our board used that platform. We shared them on our Facebook pages. We encouraged them. We gave them a deadline. So anything that was submitted, we didn't allow our teachers to submit anything on Donors Choose because they can do that on their own. But we gave them a time frame where we were really focusing on the ones that were going to be done through the foundation, so that our money could be devoted to those. And like I said, I think 2 years ago, we were around 20. No, I'm sorry. We more than doubled what we were able to give, because I think last year we gave over 56,000 through Donors Choose, and we were less than 20,000 before that. So
that's incredible. I mean, that's a story that I hear over and over again from foundations that are willing to be flexible in how they think about grants and to sort of give that over to the Donors Choose process. And Deanna, I know that you just started that for Edmond in January, and sort of the leveraging that you get when the foundation does a kickstart or gives a little bit of money to get a grant started. But then we have a lot of community members that are willing to give to those sorts of things. And it just helps really be a multiplier effect. Have you had success so far as well?
Yeah, we have. I love hearing how you guys are doing it, Amy, because there's so many different ways you can do it. And we did like a short campaign also, and we have closed that. But we're going to do a back to school one. So I'm just listening to everyone who's done it to learn like what's the best way for us to implement that. We did just a Kickstarter. So it was like $100 Kickstarter just to get people interested. And we did like the average, it was almost a 5-to-1 return on that $100. But we don't know if that's the best way to do it. We don't know. So I'm just listening. I wanted to hear how you guys did it because it's so fascinating. And I think it was a really smart move for our board to agree to do that.
I agree. I know it was a challenge and we learned a lot from the first year process that we did, but we did not do it the second year because we've been in the middle of COVID. We chose to just take the funding that we would have done and apply that per student and give that directly to the schools and let them do what they want with it for this year. But we are going to move back into the Donors Choose process for our grants next year.
Okay. I love that. This sounds like maybe my next webinar needs to be getting a lot of our Donors Choose people together to kind of talk about that process.
I want to hear it. I want to hear it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. We're coming up on the 1 o'clock hour and I want to be respectful of everyone's time and trying to get you back to your workday. Thank you so much for jumping on. Amy and Deanna, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I just really loved working with both of your boards and it's been so fun. Amy, especially, I've been watching you guys from afar in Miami. And when I saw that you all hired Vicky, I was over here cheering. And it's just really fun to see those wins. And Deanna, I can't wait to see, where you all are even in another 6 months based on your plan.
As Deanna said, As Deanna said, this is a plug for Katy too. Use her services. She did an incredible job and we're very thankful that we did it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. And to all of our guests, thanks for being a part of this. Again, you've got my number, and I just look forward to hearing from you if there's ever a way that I can serve your foundation. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here and take care.
Thanks, Katy.
Bye.
Bye.